I drove to the address mentioned in the message, my mind racing with thoughts. As I approached the place, my worst fears were confirmed. There, in front of me, was Daniel, holding Jane's hand, his face beaming with a smile I hadn't seen in months. My heart shattered into a million pieces.
As Grace stood frozen, her world collapsing around her, she knew this moment would change everything. The betrayal of her husband and best friend was more than she could bear. She needed to confront them to understand why this had happened. Wait a minute, let us go back and see how this all began.
I sat at the dining table, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee filling the air. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a warm glow through the kitchen windows. My husband, Daniel, had already left for work, or so I thought. As I sipped my coffee, I absent-mindedly reached for my phone and noticed a message notification. It was from an unknown number. Meet me at the usual place. Missing you already. My heart skipped a beat. I felt a cold chill run down my spine. Who could this be? I decided to call the number. The voice on the other end was unmistakably familiar. It was Jane, my best friend. I felt a sudden rush of anger and disbelief. I needed to know the truth. Without thinking, I grabbed my keys and headed out. I drove to the address mentioned in the message, my mind racing with thoughts. As I approached the place, my worst fears were confirmed. There, in front of me, was Daniel, holding Jane's hand, his face beaming with a smile I hadn't seen in months. My heart shattered into a million pieces. I felt betrayed and hurt. How could he do this to me? How could she, my best friend and my husband? Tears streamed down my face as I watched them, my world crumbling around me. Daniel, Jane! I screamed, my voice breaking. They turned, their faces filled with shock and guilt. I felt a mix of rage and sorrow as I confronted them, my heart aching with the weight of their betrayal. What is this? How long has this been going on? I demanded, my voice trembling. Daniel stammered, unable to meet my gaze. Jane looked down, tears welling up in her eyes. It's not what it looks like, Daniel finally managed to say, but his words felt hollow and meaningless. I could see the truth in their eyes, the betrayal that cut deeper than any knife. Not what it looks like. Then what is it, Daniel? Explain to me how my best friend and my husband end up in each other's arms. My voice was rising, filled with anger and pain. I felt a wave of nausea as the reality of the situation sank in. Jane stepped forward, reaching out to me. Please, let me explain, she pleaded. But I backed away, shaking my head. There's nothing to explain. I trusted you both, and this is how you repay me? I felt a sob rising in my throat, but I swallowed it down, refusing to let them see how deeply they had hurt me. I turned on my heel and walked away, my heart heavy with the weight of their betrayal. As I drove back home, tears blurred my vision. I had to be strong. For myself and for the future I now had to rebuild alone. After the shocking discovery of Daniel's betrayal, he drove back home in a daze. The familiar streets of Nairobi blurred past me as I struggled to keep my emotions in check. My mind was a whirlwind of anger, sadness, and disbelief. I needed answers, but more than that, I needed to confront Daniel and Jane properly. When I arrived home, I found Daniel waiting for me in the living room. His face was a mask of guilt and fear. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself before speaking. Daniel, we need to talk, I said, my voice surprisingly calm despite the turmoil inside me. He nodded silently, gesturing for me to sit down. I remained standing, needing the stability it provided. I'm sorry, he began, his voice trembling. I never meant for this to happen. It just did. How long? I asked, cutting straight to the point. How long have you been seeing Jane behind my back? Daniel looked down at his hands, unable to meet my gaze. 6 months, he admitted quietly. My heart ached at the confession. 6 months of lies, of deceit, of betrayal. And why, Daniel? Why would you do this to us? To me? My voice cracked as I fought back tears. It wasn't planned, he said, finally looking up at me. We started talking more when you were busy with work. It happened slowly. I know it's no excuse, but I didn't want to hurt you. His words felt like a slap in the face. You didn't want to hurt me? Do you realize how ridiculous that sounds? You've shattered my trust, my heart, everything we built together. He reached out to touch my hand, but I pulled away. I need time, Daniel. Time to process all of this. To figure out what I want. Right now, I can't even look at you without feeling disgusted. I turned and walked out of the room, leaving Daniel alone with his guilt. I needed space to think, to heal. But one thing was clear. Our relationship would never be the same. I headed to my bedroom, the only place that felt like a refuge. As I sat on the bed, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Jane, pleading for forgiveness and asking to meet. I tossed the phone aside, unable to deal with her at that moment. My world had been turned upside down, and I needed time to find my footing again. In the days that followed, I found myself sinking into a routine of numbness. The house, once filled with laughter and warmth, now felt like a cold, empty shell. I avoided Daniel as much as possible, retreating into the sanctuary of our bedroom or the small garden where I found some solace. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the garden, I sat on the wooden bench and let the tears flow freely. The betrayal by the two people I trusted most had left a gaping hole in my heart, one that seemed impossible to mend. I thought back to the early days of our marriage, the promises we made to each other, the dreams we shared. How did we get here? Where did it all go wrong? My mind drifted to Jane. She had been my confidant, my sister in all but blood. Her betrayal cut just as deep as Daniel's, if not deeper. As I sat there, lost in my thoughts, I heard the creak of the garden gate. I looked up to see my younger sister Amina walking towards me. Her presence was a welcome surprise. "Amina, what are you doing here?" I asked, wiping away the tears hastily. "I came as soon as I heard," she said, sitting beside me and taking my hand. "I'm so sorry, sis. You don't deserve this." Her words were a balm to my wounded soul. "Thank you, Amina. It's been overwhelming." She wrapped her arm around my shoulders, offering silent support. "You don't have to go through this alone. We're family. We'll get through this together." We sat in silence for a while, the comforting presence of my sister giving me the strength I needed. I realized that I had been isolating myself, drowning in my sorrow instead of reaching out for support. "Amina, I don't know what to do. Everything feels so broken," I confessed, my voice barely above a whisper. She squeezed my hand, one step at a time. "First, you need to take care of yourself. Focus on healing. The rest will follow." Her words resonated with me. I knew she was right. I had to prioritize my own well-being before I could make any decisions about my marriage or my friendship with Jane. "Thank you, Amina. I really needed this," I said, feeling a glimmer of hope for the first time since the betrayal. "Anytime, sis. Remember, you're stronger than you think," she replied, her smile warm and encouraging. As the night descended, we walked back into the house together, a renewed sense of determination in my heart. I wasn't alone in this. I had my family, and with their support, I knew I could find a way to heal and rebuild my life. Weeks turned into months, and slowly, I began to rebuild my life. The initial shock and pain of Daniel's betrayal had dulled, replaced by a determination to move forward. With the support of my family, especially Amina, I found the strength to confront the challenges ahead. Daniel had moved out, giving us both the space we needed. He tried to reach out several times, asking for forgiveness, but I wasn't ready. I needed to heal on my own terms. My focus shifted to my career and personal growth. I started attending therapy sessions, which helped me process my emotions and gain clarity. One sunny afternoon, as I sat in a cozy cafe overlooking the Nairobi skyline, my phone buzzed with a message. It was from Jane. I had ignored her previous attempts to reach out, but something compelled me to read this one. "I need to see you. Just once. Please, I need to apologize properly." I hesitated, but decided to give her the chance to explain. We met at a quiet park, the place where we had shared so many happy memories. Jane approached me, her eyes filled with remorse. "Thank you for meeting me, Grace," she said, her voice trembling. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I needed to apologize in person. I've hurt you deeply, and I'm so sorry." I listened, my heart heavy but open. "Jane, your betrayal cut me deeply. You were my best friend. How could you?" Tears streamed down her face as she explained. "I was lost, Grace. My life was falling apart and I made terrible choices. I'm not asking for us to go back to how things were, but I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive me someday." Her words, though painful, held a sincerity that touched me. "Jane, I need time. Trust is not something that can be easily rebuilt, but thank you for apologizing." We parted ways, a sense of closure settling over me. Forgiveness wouldn't come easily, but I realized it was a step towards healing. Back at home, I felt a sense of peace. I wasn't the same person I was before the betrayal. I was stronger, more resilient. The love and support from my family had been my anchor, helping me navigate the storm. One evening, as the sun set, casting a warm glow over the garden, Daniel arrived at the door. He looked different, more humble. "Grace, I've been working on myself. I'm here to ask if we can talk, truly talk." I invited him in, ready to hear him out. We sat in the living room, the place where our journey together had begun. "I've made mistakes, and I've hurt you deeply," Daniel began. I don't expect forgiveness overnight, but I want to make things right." His words were filled with a sincerity I hadn't seen before. We talked for hours, sharing our pain, our regrets, and our hopes for the future. It wasn't an easy conversation, but it was necessary. As the night wore on, I realized that healing was a journey, not a destination. Whether or not Daniel and I would rebuild our marriage was uncertain, but I knew I had the strength to face whatever came next. Thank you for watching. We hope you enjoyed this story. Please share your thoughts in the comments section below. Also, don't forget to like, subscribe, follow, and share this story with your friends and loved ones so they can learn something valuable too.